Hello, I'm John Rossi, a touring drummer with a love of all things animal. When I'm on the road, I visit as many zoos, aquariums... Hey, wait a minute. What's going on? Hey, what's going on there? Hello? 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 We interrupt your regularly scheduled program to bring you Rossifari Zoo news. News you can use from the world of zoos and conservation. Every week, we bring you breaking news and analysis from around the globe, featuring the animals you love and the people who care for them. And here's your anchorman, John Rossi. Hello, hello, hello. This is John, and you may have seen on my social medias that I am unable to record zoo news this week because Buzz is asleep on my head, my little chihuahua puppy. So the whole rest of this episode is just going to be the sounds of Buzz snoring on my head. Okay, admittedly, that was ridiculous, even for me. Here's the actual introduction. Hi, hello, how are you? Welcome back to Rossifari Zoo News, your look at everything going on in the world of zoos, aquariums, conservation, and general animal weirdness. So, a full week ago, I talked about how I had a tree kangaroo video going viral, and it is still doing that. Just kind of a slow trickle of virality. Is that even a thing? It's gotten well over 1 million views on Instagram and is taking off on the other socials as well. But it's all weird and takes time. And I don't know. I just keep talking about how weird that viral stuff is because it is, but I'm guessing you're actually kind of over it. But if you haven't seen that yet, it's really cool because the number one comment keeps being, I didn't even know that tree kangaroos existed. And I'm like, conservation education, yay, woo! So anyway, it also brings lots of new followers and new listeners. So yay that, and welcome to all of you that just recently discovered the podcast. I always start off Zoo News by going into some stuff about my life, like you just heard. And another one of those things is the fact that this last weekend, and honestly this whole week, I've been celebrating my son Miles's 10th birthday. So we had 2 days of parties, and then he was just kind of hanging out at my place doing the thing. And so all of that was really awesome. My son has become quite the cool young man, and you may even hear a little cameo from him later. And it just meant the world to me to get to spend, some quality time with him around his 10th birthday. I am a person who puts a lot of stock into birthdays. It's kind of the only holiday that I particularly care about. And that's because it's really the only holiday that just celebrates you. And Miles deserves to be celebrated. So I enjoyed being able to do that this week. He has become quite the author, and he does some cool coding and video game design stuff. And it's just very cool to see. On a less cool note, I recently decided to get my butt back into the gym, and it has been going pretty well. I run. And I actually decided that I needed to get back to lifting. I haven't lifted in a long time, but I decided that it was time. And so on Miles's birthday, it was actually the day afterwards, the day of his second party. I was at the gym before the party, and I realized that I was running out of time. And I said to myself, well, you can't push too hard or go too fast when you're lifting because that's stupid. And then immediately pushed too hard and went too fast while lifting and escaped unscathed and felt great and went to his party. And at one point, I bent over a cooler to pick up a water bottle, and the crackle sound that went across my lower back was one of the more impressive things I've ever heard. It was like a drum roll, y'all. It was crazy. And I stood up and went, ow. And it turns out I threw my back out. So that has been a lot of fun. It hasn't been. That was a lie. It has not been fun. But so I have been dealing with that the last couple of days. Luckily, it seems to be recovering fairly quickly. I don't think it was that big of a deal. I'm still in some pain, but it's nothing like the first day, and it's only a couple days later. So hopefully, that keeps healing up, because I do have to head out on the road soon for a bunch of drumming, and that's hard to do when you can't really use your back, functionally. So hopefully that will get taken care of. But yeah, so that is everything going on in my world right now. And a quick reminder that this is Rossifari Zoo News. It is a crowdsourced Zoo News program, so you can tag me in stories on the socials at Rossifari or on TikTok at RossiFariPod. And of course, you can also email things to me, rossifaripod@gmail.com, and I'll say your name at the end of the episode, whether I use your story or not. So with all of that said, let's get to it. All right, so I've actually been working quite diligently on a pretty intense headline story, but as I was getting ready to record this, some things seemed to be changing about that. There's some new news breaking and some different stuff, and rather than present half the story, I'm just going to wait and share the whole thing with y'all next week, unless it all just kind of blows over, so we'll see what happens there. But don't worry, those of you that love my deep dives are in for a treat a little bit further into the Zoo News section, but for now, let's get to our birth, shall we? All right, it is still the season, and that means we start this section with some red panda births. In particular, 2 red panda cubs were born at the Idaho Falls Zoo. They were born to Dad Mars and Mom Linda, who many fandas know as Talinda. Long story, but if you know the name Talinda, she's a mom. The cubs are doing well and actually have already been named, so we can officially say hello to Jupiter and Twix. And that's not all. Sunset Zoo in Kansas has announced the birth of a single red pandlet to Simone and Lufa. Lufa, by the way, is one of my favorite panda names of all times, who was named that along with his twin Doofa. Can't make it up. Anyway, the cub is named Sunisa, or Sunny for short, and she has not had an easy go of it so far. Her mom did not show maternal instincts, so she had to be hand-reared from the start, and she has already had to overcome some additional health challenges in her young life, but she seems to be doing well, and the zoo is cautiously optimistic. And while we're on the subject of red panda cubs, we head back overseas to Les Terres de Naté, another facility in France that has welcomed 4 red panda cubs to the world. The translation of the story was a little sus, but as far as I can tell, the zoo has 2 female red pandas named Shanti and Taika, both of whom spent time with male Bonnie this season, leading to twin births from each mom, a huge success for the species. France has been dropping all the pandlets this year, and I am here for it. Congrats, or as they say in France, congratulations. Sorry, I'm just excited. I'm just excited about the cubs. And actually, while we're over in Europe, the Dublin Zoo has announced the birth of a male orangutan to Mother Muher and Father Cebu. This birth is especially meaningful to the zoo, as Cebu has been the patriarch of the orangutans at the zoo, or I should say had been the patriarch of the orangutans, because he passed away in February, but not before he left one final legacy for the zoo, which is now thriving in this new infant. So yay for the circle of life and all that jazz, and we're actually going to be talking about this story more in just a little bit. Our friends at Elmwood Park Zoo announced the birth of some baby peccaries, or pecklets, and that's the real name for once. Now, you may be thinking that I'm repeating a story, as the peccaries at the zoo had pecklets earlier this year, but this is another litter. It turns out that Elmwood Park Zoo is quite good at breeding Chicoan peccaries. Congrats to the zoo. The Rosamond Gifford Zoo in Syracuse has announced the birth of 2 patis monkeys. They aren't twins, though, as they were actually born to different mothers. Both of them are girls, however. Both of the mothers did not exhibit proper maternal care towards the girls, so the monkeys are being hand-reared in the Animal Health Center ICU. You can see them during limited visibility at the hospital, and their caretakers are already working on slowly introducing them to the troupe at the zoo behind the scenes. Our friends at Connecticut's Beardsley Zoo have announced the birth of 5 guinea hog piglets. So many actual lets in this episode. Born to Mother Ethel and Father Plopper, the piglets are doing quite well. Guinea hogs are actually known for their advanced early development. They are born with their eyes open and are able to move around immediately. The group at the zoo set off exploring almost immediately upon birth and are full of energy, which you can see for yourself in the farmyard exhibit at the zoo. The penguin exhibit at the Jacksonville Zoo is called Tuxedo Coast, and that discovery is almost as exciting for me as the fact that a new penguin chick hatched at Tuxedo Coast named Pepper. Pepper is the 30th penguin to currently call Tuxedo Coast home, which is an incredible size for a penguin colony. Yay, Pepper, and yay, Tuxedo Coast! A female eastern bongo named Nyala has been born to Mother Nyota at the Milwaukee County Zoo. This is another species that pops out ready to go. Nyala started walking 25 minutes after birth and started nursing within the hour. All right, the Toledo Zoo has announced the birth of a new Nyala named Peach. Hey, Miles.
Yeah, Dad?
Isn't there some song about a character named Peach in a movie we watched recently?
Yeah? Don't you remember it?
No, of course not. It was a silly children's movie.
Oh, it goes, peaches, peaches,
peaches, peaches, peaches, I love you. Oh.
Peaches,
okay, so anyway, that's the...
peaches,
Miles, we're done. Miles, Miles, we're done. I was just... Miles! Anyway, congrats to the zoo. And by the way, just in case, I know I shouldn't have to say it, but I would never yell at my son like that or anything bad. We were very much playing, and that's just not how I parent. But, just wanted to put it out there just in case. Anyway, and then our last birth for the week is the Columbus Zoo, which has announced the hatching of 26 weedy seadragons, a first in the history of the Columbus Zoo. These babies, known as fry, hatched between June 24th and July 4th and will be raised behind the scenes for at least a year as they are incredibly fragile. Congratulations to the Columbus Zoo. And that brings us to our deaths this week, and we start this section with a sad announcement that the world has lost an incredible sheep. Franklin, a 10-year-old Southdown baby doll sheep who called Zoo Atlanta home, was humanely euthanized after an age-related decline in his health. Now, 10 years old is a great age for the species, and that's no surprise, as Franklin, also known as Frank the Tank, was absolutely loved and doted upon by his keepers. In fact, Franklin was one of my early learning experiences with Rossifari, and I wanted to share that story with y'all now. Now, you may remember that one of my first interviews on the podcast was with Danica Wolf, a keeper at Zoo Atlanta. Danica and I went on to become friends, and I found myself in Atlanta not too long after that interview, and we went to the zoo on her day off so she could introduce me to people and show me around. I had some amazing experiences, including getting to go behind the scenes to meet the binturongs at the zoo, something that at the time was just not something I really got to experience ever and really blew my mind. I mean, who am I kidding? It still blows my mind every time I get to do something cool. But as this day was going on, Danica got so excited for me to meet Frank the Tank. And when we approached the area, Danica introduced me to the keepers there and told them she couldn't wait for me to meet this incredible sheep. And my stupid butt, who was so excited about binturongs and seeing the red panda and tanuki and giant pandas at the zoo, couldn't help but make some snarky, "Oh yeah, I can't wait to meet some sheep" type comment. And y'all, the keepers let me have it. They were all very nice, of course, but they told me how amazing Franklin was and how awesome it was to spend time with him. And I heard all the stories about, how amazing he was. And of course, I felt terrible. I didn't even think about this at the time. And it worked, and I fell in love. And how could I not have when they, basically made me just by sharing how amazing Franklin is? So, that was the last time I ever mocked any species that I got to meet. And I'm glad about that because it really did help me learn that all the animals are amazing and that I need to be very aware of the fact that all keepers love their animals, even if they are common. So I think it's really cool that such a special sheep not only taught thousands of children and adults that got to interact with him over the years, but also taught me a very important lesson and one that I take with me every time I do anything for the podcast. So goodbye, Franklin. The Buffalo Zoo has said goodbye to Rascal, a 17-year-old North American river otter. The average life expectancy of a North American river otter in human care is 12.3 years, so 17 is an incredible age to reach. Rascal was quite the rascal, with the ladies siring 12 offspring that are now at zoos all around the United States, and he will be severely missed. The Stone Zoo in New England has said goodbye to Patty, one of the Canada lynxes that called the zoo home. Patty was suffering from gastrointestinal disease, and it got so bad that the vet team decided to anesthetize her to see if there was anything that could be done, despite knowing the risk of anesthetizing a lynx at that age. Sadly, as they kind of thought might happen, she did not survive the procedure and will be sadly missed. The Cincinnati Zoo said goodbye to two iconic animals recently. The first was Lady. Lady was one of the two Siamangs who would loudly sing at the zoo, especially to welcome the morning every day. In fact, the song would be so loud it could be heard throughout the zoo and in the surrounding neighborhood. Lady would sing with her partner, Opie, who survives her. She was born at the zoo in 1985, making her absence even more apparent after such a long time. Called Ladybug by her keepers, she is very sorely missed. The team is doing everything they can to make sure that Opie is kept happy and content while they work with the SSP to find a new mate. And the zoo also said goodbye to Nia the cheetah recently. Nia was born at the off-site breeding location the zoo has back in 2009 and was hand-reared at the zoo after her sibling passed away and her mother stopped producing milk, as cheetah mothers do when one cub passes, with the idea being to let the other one die off, but to also be able to get back into the reproductive cycle again to have a new litter of at least 2 cubs as soon as possible. Nature can be cold, y'all. Anyway, Nia became an incredible ambassador cheetah, doing cheetah runs at the zoo and even visiting schools and other places to inspire a love of the species in children and adults alike. Many years ago, a rogue basketball made its way into the cheetah yard at the zoo from the local neighborhood. Nia started playing with the ball on her own, and it turned into a lifelong love of playing with various balls, including many times when her keepers would join her in the yard and kick a soccer ball around with her. She will be greatly missed. The new zoo in Green Bay has said goodbye to Mayo the red wolf. Mayo, named after her birthday, which May 5th, Cinco de Mayo, was 15 years old. She passed away in her sleep and was found deceased by keepers the next morning. All indications are that she passed peacefully in her sleep from any of a number of age-related conditions. At the time of her passing, Mayo was the second oldest living red wolf in the world. She will not only be missed by her keepers and her wolf pack, but by the male Canada lynx who lived in the exhibit next door to Mayo, because they would regularly play together through the fence, which I just find adorable. The Toronto Zoo has bid farewell to Trilly, one of the 2 moose living in the Canadian domain area of the zoo. Trilly was 11 years old, which exceeds the life expectancy of moose in human care. It seems that in her old age, Trilly developed an issue with absorbing nutrition, a problem that was complicated by the fact that moose in general are known for being hard to convince to eat as they enter old age. Trilly was known for having grumpy ears, showing when she was displeased about something very clearly with the motions her ears made. She will be missed. And last but not least in this section this week, Point Defiance Zoo and Aquarium has announced the passing of Suki, an Asian elephant that was just under 60 years old. Suki was euthanized after a steady decline in her health in her old age. She was known for her intelligence and her big personality and loved splashing in her pool and getting tongue scratches. The average life expectancy for Asian elephants in human care is 49 years, so Suki well outlived that number despite dealing with tuberculosis and chronic arthritis and uterine tumors. What an incredibly resilient girl, and what an amazing staff at Point Defiance Zoo and Aquarium to guide her through all of that while giving her a great quality of life. And moving on from our births and our deaths, we get to the rest of our zoo news section. Okay, so do you remember that story about the baby gorilla that was born at the Fort Worth Zoo, but the mother was like, no thank you, and they couldn't find a surrogate mother in their own troop, so she was sent to Cleveland Metro Park Zoo, where she is being fostered and loved, and it was a super happy ending? Well, we have a few similar stories this week, which I think serve the purpose of showing how complex dealing with the social structures of primate troops can be. First of all, Woodland Park Zoo has announced that their recently born baby gorilla will be moved to a different facility. It's the same basic story as the Fort Worth one. The mother rejected the baby, 3 other females at the zoo were trained on surrogacy, and ultimately none of them worked out, so now the baby will go to a different facility to be raised by a surrogate there and to join their troop. And then the Philadelphia Zoo has also announced that, and this time at least it's not a baby, but that they recently received an adult gorilla named Patty through an SSP move. Patty's arrival has unfortunately caused social changes in the overall troop that are not in the best interest of the animals. As such, the decision has been made to move her to a new facility to help heal the wounds in the family. It's worth mentioning that this happens in the wild all the time as social structures change. Now, in the wild, Patty would read the room, so to speak, or possibly have the room read to her by the leader of the troop if she was causing issues, and would move on and try to find a new family. So the same thing is happening here, just with the slight difference that the SSP is helping. And it's worth mentioning that while Patty would be doing basically the same thing in the wild, in the cases of the babies, they wouldn't be moved. They would just die if no one in the troop chose to raise them. So instead, we get the story of 6 facilities and an SSP coming together to ensure the best lives for a bunch of gorillas of all ages. Just another example of why I love accredited zoos so much. And for our next story, well, another week, another rescued mountain lion that has gone to the Oakland Zoo. It's an orphaned cub and seems to be healthy, so the zoo has taken him in and named him Briar, as the spots on his fur resemble a blackberry bush. This is one of those stories that I feel like I repeat every week or two, but it's always worth mentioning because of the just absolutely incredible work being done by the Oakland Zoo for native wildlife. The Brookfield Zoo is the home of the North American Pangolin Consortium, which is a group of dedicated zoo conservationists working to better understand pangolins and their conservation needs. They have recently been testing thermal sensing cameras created by a group known as Operation Pangolin, with the hopes of having them used in the wild, and it has worked out well. In fact, it worked out so well that Operation Pangolin has now released the first ever thermal imagery of a white-bellied pangolin doing pangolin things in the wild at night. This is the first time scientists have been able to study the species in its natural habitat and at its hours of peak activity. So this is a huge help for understanding the species and figuring out how to best save the most trafficked animal in the world. And I know that in this world, everyone pretty much knows what a pangolin is, but I'm still amazed when I talk to people outside the zoo and conservation world. They still regularly think I am telling them that penguins are the most trafficked animal in the world. Penguins. My absolute favorite is when I say that pangolins are the most trafficked animals in the world, largely because people think they can use their scales for ancient medicinal purposes, and people look at me and say, I didn't even know that penguins have scales. But guys. Anyway, but I love sharing that story because it serves to show that for all the incredible conservation education we do in this world, we still have a long way to go and a lot of people to bring up to speed on even the most basic conservation stories. Oh, and actually, some late-breaking news that I'm going to punch in here to record, even though the episode was already done. It turns out that Brookfield Zoo has just announced the birth of a baby pangolin at their facility. I've talked on here recently about how rare pangolin births are in human care and how there is all kinds of drama around the Pangolin Consortium and the population at Brookfield. So this is a huge win for the species and for the people working so diligently to save them. This is the 13th pangolin to currently call Brookfield home, which is obviously a big deal. All right, so we've reached the point of the podcast where a story is going to turn into a deep dive, so just a heads up. So remember that exciting news bit up in the births section about a baby orangutan born at the Dublin Zoo? Well, there is more to the tale than just a baby being born. The zoo recognized that the 19-year-old mother had not sufficiently bonded with either of her previous infants, both of whom passed away shortly after she abandoned them after birth. So when they learned about Muher's pregnancy, the zoo enlisted breastfeeding human mothers to visit her and show her how it's done, similar to the story of the breastfeeding zookeeper who did the same thing at the Metro Richmond Zoo earlier this year. Muher was allowed to observe the mothers breastfeeding in a private area, and she was very interested in watching the mothers. She even went as far as to mimic the actions she saw the mothers taking at times. Now, keep in mind, this was before she had her baby, but she was still making the proper motions, mirroring what the human mothers were doing. The women were allowed to breastfeed fully clothed if they wanted, but many of them realized that orangutans don't wear shirts or bras, and so proceeded to breastfeed fully topless, which allowed Muher to see everything. Along with the in-person lessons from human mothers, Muher was shown videos of orangutan mothers breastfeeding as well. So now that the baby has been born, the question can be asked, did this work? And the answer is, kind of. So with her previous two babies, Muher showed no maternal instinct at all, abandoning the babies and letting them die. In this case, Muher showed a significant increase in maternal instincts. She was taking care of the baby and was even trying to breastfeed it. Unfortunately, she wasn't able to get it quite in the right place on the nipple, so the baby was unable to get nutrition from the experience. As such, the infant was separated from Muher and is now being hand-reared. Still, the attempt is worthy of praise, and the fact that it does seem to have had a seriously positive impact on Muher's parental instincts leads me to call this at least a partial win, and it also serves as an incredible reminder of the amazing work zoos do to take care of their animals. Of course, you may have noticed something else I said that seemed a little weird to many of you that listen, which is that Muher's first two infants died when mom abandoned them. Now, while that can obviously happen at any time, what we normally hear about is zoos pulling the infants and hand-rearing them rather than letting them die, like happened in this case. But that's actually one way that many European zoos differ from American zoos. And not just saving babies in that situation, but breeding in general. One of the biggest breaks between the best zoos in Europe and the best zoos in the United States and Canada comes over the philosophy of breeding. And while it's a lot to go into in this moment, the basic idea is that in the US, we often prevent breeding when it's not purposeful. We will put mammals on birth control or separate animals before mating can occur unless we have both a genetic need for the animal and a space to put said animal. Now, these are all components of the SSPs and just general breeding plans in North American zoos. Most European zoos take a different approach in which they allow animals to breed in a relatively unchecked fashion, as they feel it is a part of the natural life cycle of the animal, and that taking that away isn't in the best interest of said animals. They take it as far as often letting animals go through the entire process, including abandoning their young and letting them die if that's what the animal chooses to do, unless there is a very specific reason to hand rear them. In the case of this story, the genetics of the father are so important to the population in human care that the decision was made to pull the baby. But that is actually controversial over in Europe. And this isn't the only type of controversy the different approach to breeding has caused. I want you to think way back to 2014. The Copenhagen Zoo announced the birth of a giraffe named Marius, but also announced that Marius's genes were well represented in the population and that allowing him to reproduce would increase the risk of inbreeding in the population. So, coupling those issues with the fact that the zoo didn't have space for Marius or a partner within an area they felt they could safely transport him to, they had decided to euthanize the baby giraffe. And despite this being a common thing in European zoos, the internet exploded, as it does. Anti-zoo people used this as proof that all zoos are evil, of course. And American zoo lovers were shocked and dismayed and found themselves questioning their own stances on zoos, and then questioning how European zoos could do this kind of thing. Europeans basically said, this is what we always do, and then went back to sipping their tea or drinking their beer and living their generally less outraged about everything than Americans' lives. Elizabeth Charles probably said, yes, maybe giraffe, Zoos offered to take Marius in and save his life, creating additional drama as, if that had happened, not only would the inbreeding threat be real, because again, no birth control, but also then this could become a thing for every animal that would be called in this way, which, again, happens. So the zoo went ahead with the euthanasia, did a full dissection and necropsy in a public educational class, and then fed the remains to the zoo's lions, something that really put a lot of people over the top with their anger and frustration at the situation, despite the fact that the lions were pretty excited about the whole thing. And actually, that's a whole other part of this that I won't get too deeply into now because I didn't intend for this to turn into a deep dive, but it did, so here we are. It's one of the most fascinating things that the same people who will argue that zoos shouldn't exist will say that a big part of why they shouldn't exist is because it doesn't allow animals to live natural lives. But every step of this was fought against, tooth and nail, by those people, despite it all being exactly what would happen in nature. The story also points, in my humble opinion, to the strength of attachment that can be created by a name. People fall in love with animals, or people, or even inanimate objects when they get named. But I digress. As I mentioned, this story went in all kinds of ways I didn't expect, but I think it's all important stuff to understand about the zoo world as a whole. I do want to just drop in here the caveat that this has been just an overview of the philosophies of the two continents and breeding, but there is, of course, a lot more nuance than that in a lot of the discussions. Still, this is a great primer on the thinking about all of this, both of which sides I think have valid points, but all right, we'll be back after this quick break.
Hi, this is Kathy Hill from the Indian River Lagoon National Estuary Program. We're all about restoration projects in progress this season on One Lagoon, One Voice. Learn about the great strides the lagoon community is taking to restore and protect the Indian River Lagoon. Each week, we dive deep into discussions with scientists, resource managers, and nonprofit leaders to explore lagoon issues and solutions. From oyster reefs to clam restoration, algae blooms to muck, you'll learn all about the projects we're tackling to bring the Indian River Lagoon back to health. Click the link in the show notes to follow One Lagoon, One Voice, learn about the IRL Council, and explore our unique lagoon.
Enough about all of that. Let us move on for now. And as a last story, so that we don't end this segment on such a head-spinning philosophical discussion, renowned street artist Banksy's latest mural has been revealed, and it's at the London Zoo, right on the main entrance. This is the 9th and final piece in Banksy's current series, which all feature animals designed to bring cheer to London, and it demonstrates how powerful a connection to wildlife is. You can check it out on the zoo's social media pages. Stereotypical animal podcast theme song. Here to bring you to conservation news. Some super exciting news out of Melbourne, Australia. The Victorian grassland earless dragon has been spotted again. This is the first time one of these long-named animals, which Aussies probably have some ridiculous short nickname for, like the no-earo or something. Anyway, they had not been seen in decades before this recent rediscovery. The last record we have of one before right now is in 1969. The scientists that rediscovered these animals are working hard to save the species that is all but extinct, taking the recently found ones out of the wild and into a breeding program to try to repopulate the species. In fact, the Aussie government is investing close to $200,000 into a plan to train detection dogs to find more of the lizards out in the wild so that every remaining one can be snagged and put into this program. The plan with the breeding program is to increase the population enough to allow for reintroduction as soon as possible, so here's hoping it all works out. And from potentially reintroducing a species to trying to eradicate one in the name of conservation, the 2024 Florida Python Challenge has begun. This is an annual competition sponsored by Governor Ron DeSantis and many private organizations that aims to raise awareness about invasive species and encourage public engagement in conservation efforts. Prizes adding up to $25,000 will be awarded for people removing the most pythons, the largest python, and other such categories. As an invasive species, the python problem does a lot of ecological damage, but it's definitely one of those things that many conservation-minded people I know still kind of furrow their brow at, while also admitting it is necessary. killing for conservation is definitely a weird feeling, even when it works. And finally, in conservation news, a group of bushtail possums have been relocated from their home on Kangaroo Island to an area in central Australia to try to reestablish a population in that area. Now, this is a species that thrives in many areas of Australia, but is believed to have gone extinct in central Australia. Although, based on our story about the no-ero, it's hard to say for sure. Still, you may wonder what caused a species to go extinct in one area when it's thriving in other places. Introduced predators. They completely wiped the species out in the area in question, which helps to shed even more light on why the Florida Python Challenge is actually important, even if, again, it does feel a little wonky. In other news. Okay, so this story was sent to me and I just glanced at it and I thought it was awesome, and I didn't realize that the study took place in 2016 until I was writing it up for this, but I don't care because it's really cool. So it's news to me and you get to hear about it. A 2016 study shows that gorillas hum and even sing while eating. The study shows that these songs aren't just a repetitive noise, like maybe, some kind of vocalization telling other gorillas that they are eating or they found food or whatever. Instead, the melodies change all the time, as though the gorillas are literally improvising songs about the food they are eating. Now, I admit that sounds like a fair bit of anthropomorphism there, but first of all, it's the study that says it, not like me. That's just not my opinion. And second of all, as a person who regularly sits and makes up like theme songs for my meals and weird crap like that, I just need this one, okay? Just give me this one, all right? Please? Thank you. And last but not least, in other news, a bear recently entered an elementary school in California and went to an empty classroom. When the teacher re-entered the room, she was shocked to find a bear running at her. She quickly stepped out, closed the door, and locked it, and then called her husband. And the two of them talked about what to do, and they decided to simply go together and open the classroom and school doors and let the bear out, and the bear left. So, cool. Good story so far. But the reason it gets this placement in the podcast... the mascot for the school is the Bears, and the school is called the Home of the Bears after that mascot. And even better than that, the teacher, Mrs. Salmon. Seriously, spelled just like the fish. Which makes me wonder, can this bear read? What is happening here? But, regardless of the literary acumen of the bear, I'm glad everyone was safe, both human and apparently very literary bear.
Oh, animal holidays. Animal holidays. Hey!
And that brings us to our animal holidays for the week. And it is August, which is Asian Elephant Awareness Month, National Catfish Month, National Parks Month, and August is for Antelope Month. Then for our individual days, we've only got a couple this week. The 17th is National Black Cat Appreciation Day and National Honeybee Day. The 19th is World Orangutan Day. The 20th is World Mosquito Day. And the 21st is World Goat Day. And those are your animal holidays for the week. So there you have it, folks. Another episode of Rossifari Zoo News is all wrapped up. I'd like to take a moment here to say thank you to all of my Red Panda level patrons, Dr. Laura Shank, Dr. Stephen Williamson, Barbara Bennett, Jenny Owens, and Kevin Williams. I'd also like to remind y'all that you can support the podcast for as little as $3 a month by going to patreon.com/Rossifari. And, we appreciate everyone who is there doing the thing and getting their cool bonus audio from time to time. I'd also like to say thank you to everyone who contributed to this week's episode of Zoo News, including Anya Keene, Colleen Lenahan, Kim Cooley-Croninger, Carrie Kirkpatrick, Kevin Williams, Emily Rockbuck, Jay Meredith, Karen Musklow, Matt Patford, Ali Malensky, Kay Malensky, The Malenskys, Holly Page, Sam Evans, Lizard Dunlevy, Miles Rossi, Dr. Laura Shank, Dr. Zoe Rossi, Ann Yoshioka, Jacob Newman, Crystal Chapman, and Rowena White. Thank you all so much for contributing to this week's episode. And y'all, my back hurts from recording this, so I need to crawl my butt out of this chair and go relax. But before I do that, let me remind you that the words Newsy credits backwards are Steider Kiswan. The Rossifari podcast is produced, hosted, and engineered by John Rossi. Editing and fact-checking by John and Dr. Zoe Rossi. Our theme song is Sevens by Nathan Burke, performed by Nathan and John. Interrupting John theme and additional voices by Taylor Isaac Gray. You can reach John directly on Instagram and Facebook at Rossifari or by email at rossifaripod@gmail.com. Rossifari is part of the Daydreamer Media Network. Now, stop listening to me and go visit a zoo. The penguin exhibit at Jacksonville Zoo is called Tuxedo Toast. Toast? It's Coast. Tuxedo Toast. I would watch a cartoon called Tuxedo Toast.